So the British are actually managing to gain a little bit back from the disparity in losses they took trying to clear out Maxwell's Light Brigade, which they've finally done. As you can see, they've set up their field artillery here along the creek. You've got some partial blocking LOS terrain here, at least for stuff that's directly in front of them. Fortunately, this guy firing over this way doesn't have to worry about this partial blocking LOS. And as it turns out, initially some of Wayne's troops, I think this is the 1st Pennsylvania Brigade, were spread out here and just in wide open terrain in front of this artillery. So they had to hightail it out of there. The problem was that when the British initially set up this artillery over here, these guys were still frozen. So I had to unfreeze them right quick at the start of the 1 p.m. turn. The problem is that they've now taken 2 rounds of fire and only been able to move once, just thanks to initiative rolls. And in terms of moving them out of here, they have to start in line. That's a requirement for the scenario. So they all had to switch to march column to do an about face and get the hell out of here. Not quite an about face. They actually had to, I think it was like to move from line to march column when you're initially facing that way. To move into a march column facing that way was, I think, 2 movement points for the Americans on the formation change chart. But nonetheless, they only have 4 moves, so they were able to get kind of out of the way. They're a little bit farther away, but now they're in column. And I thought, well, they can. I'll take my chances. I have to roll. This artillery is going to be firing on the 1 to 1.5 table because you're looking at 7 to 9 hexes away, so there'd be a ×2 modifier firing into a clear terrain hex, which is a defensive 10. So I thought, I have to roll high, so maybe I'll get lucky and they won't roll high. Well, of course they rolled high twice. Once when they were lined up here in line, I rolled like a 90 something. So that did 2 points of damage to one of these regiments. One of the big ones, I think it might have been the 1st Pennsylvania. Took 2 hits. Well, now again, I just rolled, and they were firing at this unit here, Hartley's regiment. And because they're in column, they had to take an extra casualty, so they're down to 1 strength point now. So, and of course, failed their morale check, so they're shaken. And fortunately, Hartley's still alive. So right off the bat, just with 2 volleys from this artillery over here, the Americans have already lost 4 strength points. So if the Brits, with their fairly strong field artillery, can keep that kind of bombardment up, these guys can end up crumbling pretty quickly. And now there's a lot more here. You can just see just out of frame, I got all this militia over here. So it's not too terrible yet, especially because these guys are going to move to a place where they can't get hit. Some of these guys here, this is Green's division, he's still frozen. Well, not anymore, because I just fired at him, actually. So, well, only those units that are shot at can move. So it doesn't, shooting at one of Green's units doesn't unlock a whole brigade or division. It just unlocks that unit. So I fired at this stack here and missed with some of the battalion guns over here. And so these guys can move out of the way, which they probably will. I don't want to just sit there, especially given the way I'm rolling. I don't want to sit here and just have my army get decimated by long range, although not too long in this case. Have my army get decimated by artillery fire. So, I do have cannon that are in entrenched positions along these hillsides here, so I can return some fire. The problem is, whereas the Brits can kind of fire around these things, it's harder for the Americans to get, like this guy can't get a target on this field artillery here at all. So, if I want to move him and try and get better shots, I could do that. I do have good shots on the battalion guns here from this artillery here, which I changed their facing. So they're no longer, unfortunately, facing through the entrenchment, and the fire is not coming through the entrenchment. The entrenchment's only on the two front hex sides here. Well, I guess I'm not really sure how that would work, because this hex side is entrenched. This hex side is not, but I'm actually firing out of the vertex here. So I don't know if that would be considered. Well, it wouldn't be a partial block, but I think I would if you're firing through a vertex. Given that the way LOS works through partial blockage, I would think that firing along a vertex into where one side is entrenched and one side is not would give you the entrenchment bonus. But because I think flanking fire has to come through, flanking fire can't come along a vertex like that. But I'll have to double check the rules. I might actually have that backwards, and that flanking fire is acceptable along a vertex. But I thought I read the example in the book that flanking fire has to come from behind. So as of now, I would probably give them the 0.75 entrenchment modifier. Actually, come to think of it, these guys can't fire anyway, because I wasn't looking at the hex right here, which has trees. This stuff here is just scrub terrain. This does not block LOS, but these trees here do. These are not just decorative road trees. This is actually a forested hex. So these guys have no shot. Wow. I don't know why I turned them in. I may have to move them somewhere more effective. I'm starting to wonder why I even set them up there, given that I guess they had, from here, they did have a shot onto this part of the stream here in case somebody's trying to march around to Gibson's Ford there. Yeah, I'm not sure what I was thinking setting them up there. They may have been required to be within a certain number of hexes, probably from here. But regardless, fortunately nobody can really hit them right now either, so they would be free to move without being too worried about taking lots of damage. Then I've got this guy over here, who also, unfortunately, because of these forest hexes here, doesn't have much of a shot on some of the units either here. I guess he does have a shot at these battalion guns that I set up back here at the blocked Chad's Ford, so he could shoot at those guys. It looks like he also has a shot into this field artillery here, which may be a better target. That field artillery is particularly damaging. The battalion guns, not so bad. So just a quick look here at the sudden reversal of fortune for the Americans. Now they're dealing with what the British had to deal with up against the Light Brigade. Just crazy good rolls. I've never rolled on percentile dice. I've never rolled this many rolls at 90 or above. And I've tried multiple different sets of dice, and it just keeps coming back with these super high rolls. Except then when I check morale, and then I'll usually roll like a 15 or a 20. And of course people get shaken and disrupted and so forth at that. So we'll just have to see. Alright, up to the 2 p.m. turn now, and as you can see, the American line just to the east of the Brandywine has pulled back to get out of this open plain here where the British guns have started or have lined up, and they did some damage already to the American troops that were there, and now they've run for the hills. So as you can see, they've moved there. I've got cannon still there and those entrenchments. I figure with the entrenchments that'll help them, hopefully give them an advantage at withstanding any bombardment that the British will do there. I've moved this guy, whatever his name is, Brigadier General Knox, I believe. He's commanding one of the cannon, and I've got another one moving up to be next to him. So that will allow him, one of his special abilities is to be able to command any artillery and any adjacent artillery to his hex to fire on the same target. So we will be employing that to try and maximize the American artillery response to the Brits here. And in fact, I've already done 2 strength points worth of damage to the Brits, to their artillery over here. So one of their battalion guns over here got hit by the American artillery position here above the village, or the farm, or whatever that is. And then I got a lucky shot in on one of these field batteries just across Chad's Ford there. So not great for the British to have lost some artillery there, but on the other hand, their artillery did do some damage. Did 4 points of damage to the Americans here too, which is why they're running for the woods. The positions that they start on are just too exposed. So, and again, they're exposed to anybody rolling higher than an 80 plus, but I've done that numerous times. So, historically, I'm not really sure how accurate that is. Would these historically, and again, I don't know enough about how these troops were deployed during the battle, but would the Americans have had to go hide up in the woods or behind hills to avoid the British cannon? I don't know. All I can say is that for game purposes, yes, they have to hide. They can't just stand out there and get shot at turn after turn after turn. They'll be all dead by the end of it. So, this is not some of this artillery. Some of these guys here might be a little too close. Yeah, so they should probably move. But, guys that are 10, 12 hexes away, historically, however far that was, would they have really needed to move without being completely decimated? Maybe. I just don't know enough about artillery of that time period. But this is a fairly long distance here that they're being shelled from. Might have done some damage, but would it have destroyed entire regiments? I don't know. All I can say is they're hiding in the woods now. So the Brits have just all sort of funneled in here to their position, and they're just sitting here behind the artillery while the bombardment goes on, waiting for Cornwallis and Howe to show up in the north. Once that happens, then they'll start crossing the creek to try and form up and hit the Americans. They'll probably wait to see how Howe does. So let's take a look way up here at our sort of right flank detachments for the Americans. So initially, when I was moving all of these commands up here, and there is, you've got Alexander's division, Sullivan's division, and actually I think that's it. You've got Alexander and Sullivan up there. I don't know if... So there's Maxwell, Alexander. Yeah. So a couple different commands. What's missing from Alexander's division are these guys here, which is Nash's guys. They are, I think, historically regarding the American artillery train. So these guys are frozen here until 5:20 p.m. and then they'll be able to move up and support, and their help will probably be needed. But initially, when I was moving all these guys up here to Birmingham Hill, I thought, this is like a huge area, and all the Brits are going to be coming in kind of from that road all the way almost to that road there. So they're going to be coming in kind of all along that northern line there, which you can see will just drive straight into Birmingham Hill. And I didn't think, I thought, how the hell am I going to cover this much space? Well, as it turns out, I can get pretty close, actually, with the units that are there. Now, it's a pretty thin line. A lot of these American units are 1, 2, 3 strength points. There are a couple, though. You can see there's a 6 there. And I've got some artillery. Got a couple guys hooked on a line there where the hill kind of juts out. And then here you can see the New Jersey Brigade and some of these other guys here. There's some 4s and 5s in there. So, there's some decent size troops, but there's really no reserve. It is one long line along the hill, and I put, to kind of keep the Brits from trying to get around that further around that right flank, I ran these guys out along the Meeting House Hill and put an artillery position there that can have pretty wide fire down onto the plain here where the British will probably be forming up. So, I think it's a decent position. I'm not sure what the historical position was in terms of how much of the hill they actually defended, but I am covering darn well near the whole thing. So, we'll see how that works. One of the dangers might be, and I did put an artillery position there, sort of at that crest on the west side of the hill, but the line doesn't quite reach it. So I'm thinking if the Brits try and make an action to get around onto that American left, I can pull that artillery back and refuse the line if I need to. The problem is, you don't want to leave too wide of a gap here for the British to get through, because then this will just let them right down along the creek to meet up with Knyphausen. But the British position isn't necessarily to just get past the Americans. It's actually to engage and destroy the Americans. So, more likely than trying to get around and move past them, they'll try and get up onto this flank and try and get around on this side of the hill, roll up the American line. So these are some larger units here that are prepared to fall back across the crest of the hill and refuse that whole line if they need to. So I think I'm putting the finishing touches on getting that line set up, and then those guys will be sitting there for 2 hours or so. We're at 2 o'clock now, and I think the British don't start coming on here until 4:45 or so. They get on pretty late. So I will have Hazen's detachment coming down one of these roads here at 2:20, 2:40 maybe, something like that. I think he shows up before 3, hot footing it ahead of Howe's entire column. So he will be running, and I may just have him run right down the road here and plug in to this end of the American line. So it's the defense is ongoing. Just turned into an artillery duel down here, and that's basically where it's at right now. We are into the doldrums. It's now we're kind of getting through fewer. In the early stages, it was all British activations and nothing for the Americans to do. Now we're kind of the opposite, where the only British activations are Stearns' command and Lieutenant Colonel Cleveland here and his artillery command bombarding the Americans. So most of the Americans are unfrozen now. This turn, I forget whose division that is, Armstrong's militia division will unfreeze, and I may start pulling these guys back this way, since it looks unlikely that the Brits would make a serious effort to try and cross at Gibson's Ford, just because it would take them a long time to get there, and then they'd be funneling back through along the hill there. And if the Americans set up their line properly, the Brits would be funneling a narrow line right into a big American line that could stretch out there. So the Americans would end up essentially crossing the T there, except on land in this case, which would be just about as bad. So that's where we're at the start of the 2 o'clock turn.